Hello shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers out there on YouTube. Today we're working on a 2004 Honda Odyssey minivan. It's got the 3.5 V6. Very good engine. Pretty good little automobile. This has got 204,000 on the original timing belt. And you can see there's a few cracks in there. Those lines are cracks. They're not lint balls or whatever. There we go. Now you can see it a little better. There's cracks in there. And they sure pushed it to the limit. I wouldn't have never went so far, because the fact that they're supposed to be interference engines. You take a $500 service or whatever and turn it into $2,500 or $3,000 repair. Not very smart. Anyway, since I've got it apart, I'll go ahead and bring you up to speed. How we got to where we're at. If you want to take and do an inspection on one before you take it apart, take the front cover off. You can pull this little rubber inspection plug off, but all that does is expose the timing mark where it's at. It doesn't help you because you can't see the belt. You have to take this cover off. And there's another identical cover. Well, it's not identical because they're opposite sides, but the one for the rear cam back there. But it takes a little bit to get this cover off. Need to take the upper engine cover off, and if you don't want to break it, you got to take this little plastic grommet out that clips into the cover right there. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 10mm bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh no, that's 5. That's the clip for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 10mm head bolts, and they've got shoulders on them. That's what the bolt looks like. All of them, all the way around. They're all the same bolt, so you don't have to worry about which one of them's longer or shorter. They're all the same. So if you drop them, it doesn't matter. Just pick them up and put them wherever. And I went ahead and took the power steering return line off and drained it and pulled the reservoir up out of the way. I left that's the supply line actually to the pump. I went ahead and left the return line connected to the reservoir and just picked it up out of its holder right here and set it up here out of the way. The powerful steering pump, just 2 bolts that holds it on once you got the belt off. These 2 bolts here, 12mm head bolts, are both the same length. The one goes back here and the front one goes right there. And with the supply line disconnected from the reservoir, you can just pick your pump up with the pressure line on it and just set it over on top of the engine out of the way. And that gives you all this access right here. And the upper motor mount, or front motor mount, whatever you want to call it, it has to come off because it goes between the rungs of the belt, so you have to take it off. Where is that mount piece at? Here it is. Here it is. This piece right here goes in right there. Take that long bolt off. Right here, 17mm head bolt. That sets in there. Some of these have a loose laying rubber ear, like an insulator, but these are attached so we don't have to worry about them falling off. But you got the one 17mm head bolt that goes through it, and you got two 14mm head bolts right here, the same length, that go into that holds it down, actually holds the mount up to this ear right here. So this piece actually would mount like that right there. And because the belt runs through here, you have to take this off. And the bottom bolt is short, but the two top bolts are the same length. And you can see one is, the head's exposed, and the other one is recessed in there. You can still get it with a shallow socket. I would use a good 6-point, so you don't risk rounding that off. Those bolts were pretty tight. And anyway, so got them set out of the way. I've already got, also to get that upper bracket off, you got to take this 10mm bolt out right here out of this wire loom. You can see the bolt hole right there. That goes into this bracket right there. That's where it threads into. So you got to take that bolt out. Not a big deal. Your rear cover back here, you can see it's got a loom that's attached to this. Your wire loom harness kind of clips into that, so you got to pull it out of there to get this up out. And it kind of relearn the wire back that way out of your way, so you can see your timing marks. Your timing marks on the cam get the camera down there, you can see. You can see the notch in the cam right there, and then there's a notch back there in the back of the timing cover housing right back there. Those line up, and I'm not going to be able to get the camera back there on the rear cam, I don't think, where you can see it, but we'll take a look. Now let's see. Okay, that divot we're looking at that runs up and down is the mark in the back of the cam. And then now let's get a pointer. That back there that I'm pointing at is the divot in the back of the timing cover housing. And then right here is the mark on the cam. And I think that might be another, yeah, that's another secondary mark. But it's the same place as that one there. So we know that that's lined up, and we're lined up down at the bottom. We'll go down there and I'll show you it. Okay, see if I can get the right angle here. And get my pointer. Get my pointer out. Now you're there's a mark in that tooth right there, right on the edge of the tooth. It is a little divot in the end of the tooth. You can just barely see it, but it's there, right there at the corner of the right side of this tool. And it's straight up and down. You can see there's an arrow right there on the bottom of this webbing right there. There's an arrow right there. Don't line it up with the center of this ball, because that arrow is to the left of that. But it points straight down at that divot in the end of that tooth. And you can use the timing or the crank pulley bolt. It's a 3/4 or a 19 millimeter. This bolt for your crank pulley. You can put it back in to rotate your crankshaft. And if your mark here is lined up, you got to make sure that your marks on the cams are lined up, because you could be on the wrong stroke. Because each one time this goes around, your cams only go around a half a revolution. So 2 turns of the crank equals 1 turn of the cam. So check and make sure your marks on the cam are that you're on the right stroke. To get this bolt loose, you might have to use the old starter trick. Use a short or a shallow socket on a good extension and go up that way toward the back of the engine mount that I was showing you here. That piece there, where the mount is here, but your breaker bar is up this way and it comes against it, and when you hit the key, it'll come over and hit it and hold it still, and the starter will knock that bolt loose. But don't let the engine start. Just give it a bump. And don't bring it down around this way, because it can come up and hit your oil filter and break that housing off. But once you make sure you got your timing marks right, then take your belt tensioner, which I've already removed. It's a hydraulic tensioner, but it is not oil fed from the engine. It's a sealed unit. It goes up right up here. You can see the bolt there, or bolt hole, and one up there. And it pushes against that ear right there that my finger's on. And you want to check, make sure all of your pulleys are good. That's the idler for the tensioner. And then you got one here. Make sure that one's good. And then your water pump up here. It's a good thing to go ahead and replace the water pump while you're in there, or at least check and make sure that it's not leaking, because it is quite laborsome to do this. You know, it's about 4 hours labor, and it's about another 45 minutes labor to replace the water pump while you're in here. But if you put it back together, you got to put a water pump on it. You got another 4 hours and 45 minutes to take it back apart to put a water pump on it. So, but this one's a low budget job, so we're going to replace as is needed. And so we've got the tensioner off, the timing marks are set, so we'll go ahead and pull the belt off, and we can get a better look at it in the light, and you can see the condition of the belt. I'll go up here at the top. Now, some engines, when you take the timing belt off, the cams will jump on you. They'll spring back to a kind of a between cam lobe position, and sometimes you have to put there'll be a holder device you can put on there to keep the cams from rotating on you, but this is not the case. You can see that didn't move at all, and that one didn't move at all. So we don't have to worry about that. I'll step out here in the light. Well, let's see. Try to get my camera to focus. There we go. There you go. There's a split right there. There's a pretty good split right there. I can't see through my lens is all scratched up. I can't really see what I'm showing you, but that crack goes about a third of the way across it. So it's pretty evident that the belt is beyond its recommended age, and is a good time to go ahead and replace it. This is your serpentine belt tensioner, and it goes on the engine like that. And this top bolt here, that right there, is left hand thread, and it doesn't thread into aluminum. There's actually a nut. You can see that it sets into a hex recess in there, so you can crank that down pretty tight. You don't have to worry about stripping the threads. And because this tensioner's got so much pressure on it, that's probably why they use a steel nut in there. So to loosen this tensioner, to get the belt off, you put your wrench air on that 14mm bolt and push it that direction. So it's going to go that way to take the tension off of the belt, so you can take the belt off. But to remove the tensioner, you have to take that 14mm bolt right there. It comes loose. That's got a retainer, that white-ish sleeve there is a retainer that holds that bolt in. If it doesn't stay in there, it's no big deal. And then you got this small 12mm head bolt there in the bottom, but that's how that assembly fastens in there. I took the top pulley off because when it's setting in there, your timing cover, your bottom timing cover, this sets in right here, and it kind of gets in the way of, I think it was the bolt that goes, let's see, yeah, it got in the way. You can see what I'm talking about. It got in the way of being able to get to that bolt right there. But I don't know, I suppose you can take it off, take that bolt, and leave that top pulley on, and just take the whole thing off with the top pulley on there. But I don't know, I was just in my own little happy place when I took that off, I guess. But anyway, we'll go ahead, we don't have the new timing belt yet. We'll go ahead and take the tensioner and show you how it is that you reset that tensioner. You see the pin there, it's got a hole through it. Got a hole going through it, and the casting has got a hole there, and it goes through. But you got to get the pin pushed in. So I set it in the vise and crank it down slow. Make sure it's setting in the vise square, so you're not pushing it at an angle and putting unnecessary force on it. And I just crank it slow. Don't crank it fast. Give it time for the hydraulics to work. Just crank it slow. Still cranking. About another crank and a half I went while I paused the video, so you didn't have to sit and wait. Pause the video again. We got it, looks like it's about lined up there. And you do enough of these, you get a keyway you can put in there. And still got a little bit, we can crank it in. There we go. There it went all the way through. Once you get it pinned, then release your vise. And you're all set. And when you get your belt on, then you put that up in there, put your 2 bolts in, and tighten it down. Once you get your 2 bolts torqued down, then pull that pin out. If you push your pin in too far, that's really too far. You'll have to pull it out because to get it to where it's almost flush. Otherwise, when you put it in, it'll bend over and then you can't get it out. So I'm gonna have to pull that out before I put it in to where it's just sticking through like 1/8 of an inch. Then when you get it in there, then pull that pin all the way out, and this will push out and start putting pressure on that tensioner. And once it's released all the way, you're done. And then rotate your crankshaft 2 turns and go back up to top and check your cam gears. Make sure you're still in time. But we don't have the belt yet, so we're just doing this ahead of time. So we'll see you when we get the belt. Some of these timing belts will have white marks, or even a white mark and a yellow mark across them. Like the 2 white marks might line up for the cam gears, and the white mark might line up for the crank. This belt doesn't have that, but it's of no concern. We've got positive ID marks on the engine for the cam and timing, or the cam and crank marks. That's what I meant to say. And I went ahead and let's see if you can tell with the light. I took a black marker, there you can see it, and colored the top of the tooth where the mark is. Let's see if is it going to focus. Yeah, you can see it better there now. You can see right on the end of the black tooth, you can see the notch, that's the right tooth. And again on that one, there it is. So it's lined up. These are 17mm head bolts, and I'm going to set the belt on there, and I'm going to leave the crank pulley where it's at, but I'm going to rotate the right side cam gear. I'm going to rotate it clockwise about maybe a tooth, and let the belt drop in, and then I'll roll it back, and that'll take the tension out on this side. Yeah, I got the belt on the crank pulley down there, and it goes to the inside. Well, try to get the camera where you can see. The belt goes to the inside of the right middle idler, and then comes up around the front cam gear, and then under the water pump it acts as an idler, and back around the cam gear and back on this side of the tensioner. And we don't have the tensioner on right now because we need all the slack we can muster to get it set on there. And we got a little bit of slack here on the tension side of the belt, and the cam gear is turned just a smidge this side of the mark. So we'll put our wrench on there and roll it back counterclockwise and bring the timing mark back in line. And that pulls the tension. That pulls the tension on the belt here, so there is no slack, and it's all over here where we're going to be needing it. Because this pulley has got a shoulder on it, where this one don't. So we need to have all that slack over there so we can get the belt to drop into place. And we'll go ahead and get it on there. There it's going on. I loosened that idler pulley tensioner assembly down here to give me a little bit more slack so I could get the belt to come around it. And I rolled this cam back just a hair like I did the other one, and kind of hold on to it because it can jump away from you, and I don't know how much that thing can jump out of time before it might impact the piston with a valve, and I wouldn't think it'd be that soft, but then you got to make sure that your belt, you kind of go at an angle to get it underneath this little tab. There's one here and one on the back side too, like right here. So the belt kind of goes under it, and that's going to hold it from slipping. Make sure we get it all the way up under there and pushed back. And then we'll roll the belt, or the cam back, rather, not the belt, the cam. Trying to get it slid back underneath the tab on the back side here. There it went. There it went. Okay, now we're going to roll the cam back into time. That daggum. No, we're still off. We need to come a tooth further clockwise. Well, second time's a charm. I got it that time. I had to roll it back about a tooth and a half to 2 teeth to get it to, when it grabbed, it took the slack out between the front cam and the water pump. And when I rolled it back in time, all of the slack would be gone. So you don't want any slack between the cam gear or the crank gear and any of your cam gears with your crank, your cams both in time, and they are. So now let's get the crap out of the way. You can see we didn't move that cam, it's in line. And recheck underneath. We're in good shape down there. So we'll tighten that oh, that was the idler pulley we was looking at. Tighten that bolt. And let's see. There, you're seeing it. Tighten that bolt right there back on the tensioner. And it's just a secure shoulder bolt that lets that tensioner pivot freely on it. It's a shoulder bolt. Make sure you get it wiggled to get it centered on that bolt so that that bolt's tight, but it's not binding. Now we're ready to put the tensioner plunger on there. You can see I pulled that pin out just a little bit, so it's just barely sticking through. We'll get it set up there, and it goes in there like that. Okay, got the tensioner fastened on. Two, I guess are like 8mm bolts. That's the thread size, but 10mm head. And you know, so you don't put your 1/2 inch impact on there and slam them down to 1800 ooga doogas. You'll break them off. Just good and snug, German torque specs, good and tight. And with the tensioner still pinned, if you push on you can see it taking up the slack in the belt here. There shouldn't be a whole lot of flexibility in this gear. So or slack in the belt, that is. Let's see, find my pliers, pull on that. That's not going to just slide right out. And my pliers were up here on top, so we'll see if we can get it from up here. Yeah, let's see. Just get a good grip on it. And now let's see. Now these pliers, there we go, got it. Kind of mangled it, but I got it. If you do enough of them timing belts, you wind up with several of those pins. I've done my share of them. So it's all snug in there. Let's see. Mark is still good. And it's a good thing to roll it 2 revolutions on the crank to make sure that your cam marks are, that everything was seated properly, and that mark is good and that mark is good, to make sure that everything's square. So I'll go ahead and rotate it. Okay, I rotated it, and everything stayed on the mark, so we're ready to put it back together. I put the bottom cover on, and there's I'll call it a washer, more like a guide, goes on there. It is staked for the keyway, but it's got a bell shape on the end of it like that. It's not flat. You want the cup to point outward, and that gives a dull edge for the timing belt. If it rubs against it, it'll rub against that dull edge and not that sharp edge, and it keeps it from wanting to walk off of the pulley. Sometimes I'll start these and run them, but because the crank gear did not have a sleeve on it or a shoulder, I don't like to do that because it could fall off. So we'll get the crank pulley put on, and then we'll start it. And it fired right up. Runs pretty good. Check and see that there aren't any issues. Then we'll go ahead and shut it back down and put the upper covers on and get the motor mount put in. We'll put that in first, and then we'll do the upper covers. Well, how stupid is that? I picked up this motor mount, and I see that bolt hole right there. The lower timing belt cover goes around that, and that bolt goes in right there. So I got to take that back off and put this on first. Dang it.